the Beyond Africa podcast. Welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast, the only platform where experts share their views on African issues. Again, dear viewers, you're welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast with me, Ngalim Bernard. Today, we're discussing elections in Cameroon. As I informed you previously, the elections are high stakes for many reasons, but amongst them, there are two fundamental reasons. The first is the current president is 92 years old and he's been in power for 42 years. And he recently, in fact, today, he submitted his documents as a candidate to succeed himself. And secondly, the leading opposition party leader, Professor Moïse Timtchueng's candidature has been hanging in the balance. But we learned yesterday through unofficial sources that Manidem, another political party, has invested Professor Maurice Kamto and he's going to run under the banner of Manidem. The question now is, will the Constitutional Council approve of his candidature? Another issue we are looking at is the challenge that Professor Moïse Timtchueng brought before the Constitutional Council, challenging the Electoral College. He wants the Constitutional Council to invalidate the decree because, as he claims, there is no Electoral College to be convened. So what are the legal stakes? What does the law say? So first of all, let me introduce you to our guest, Professor Moïse Timtchueng. You are welcome to the Beyond Africa podcast.
Okay, thank you very much, Ben, for inviting me again to take part to this discussion concerning the electoral process that is going on in Cameroon. And I want to greet all our viewers and all those who will have to see this podcast. Thank you.
Thank you so much. After our first conversation here, we had a lot of positive vibe about it, and that encouraged us to invite you again to the program. So that is why you are here. But before we go into the substance of our conversation, dear viewers, I want to invite you all to subscribe to Professor Moïse Timtchueng's YouTube channel. He does a lot of great work analyzing the law. His law is not mainly political. The analysis he does on his channel are based on the law as we should know it, our rights, what the law says, what the challenges you can face around the law are, and what you should learn. He brings it down to very simple levels that anyone can understand. When he's talking there, he is not the professor that analyzes big issues in class using all the big Latinisms and maxims. No, he speaks in a language that you and I can understand. So he makes law easy for us. So I encourage you all to go to his channel. What is the name of the channel again, Prof?
Yes, the YouTube channel, Le Droit au 237. It is in French. That is the law in 237, which is the telephonic indication for Cameroon. Le Droit au 237. YouTube.
Thank you so much. I'll drop the link in the description of this video so you can always have it at any time. I encourage you to go subscribe to his channel. I also encourage you to subscribe to this channel because we're going to receive as many guests as possible for insightful, educational, and well-meaning conversations around the elections, the politics, the law, the stakes, and of course, the diaspora engagement. So, Prof, let's talk about why I run after you all these days. The first thing I want to talk about is the challenge that Professor Moïse Timtchueng has brought against the decree that convenes the Electoral College. What do you think about that? Is that a credible challenge to bring at this time? Instead of preparing for elections, he is challenging a decree that has been signed by the president as required by law.
No, it is a very serious procedure because you cannot intend to challenge for an election which is not fair, and the fairness of the electoral process starts from the electoral list. You see, and you cannot then call for the electoral call without knowing who are the persons to take part to the vote. So it is a very important challenge, and it is normally brought before the Constitutional Council because, according to the law, it is the Constitutional Council who is to manage the whole electoral process. Any litigation that can arise concerning the presidential election is to be taken in front of the Constitutional Council. And so you are conveying the people to come to an election where you don't know who are going to elect, to take part to the vote. So it is not just, I would just say to waste time. No. It is a very important challenge because the fairness of the credibility of the elections start with the list of those who can elect. And this list does not exist. Because when you read the communique of the Director General of Ekane, he said that the list of voters is still provisional because before removing all the double registration, the list was about 7.8 million, and after removing the dual registration, it is now about 7 and 7. So you see, the list is not stable, and you cannot go to elections without knowing who are going to vote. So it is very important. It is true that this litigation does not stop the process, but it is a fundamental question that is raised by Professor Kamto, which has to be solved before the elections can take place on the 20th of October.
Thank you, Prof. If he is challenging the legality and the validity of the decree convening the electoral code, that the electoral core, that is the electoral college of those who are going to vote, it means that the electoral college is not valid. And if the electoral college is not valid, it means there cannot be elections, because an invalid electoral college cannot vote, isn't it? So he's stopping the process.
Yes. Normally, if the electoral core is not, I would say in French, I would say fiable, that if it is not credible, I think we cannot talk of good elections. I think what Elecam can do now, since the electoral core has already been convoked. Yes, as the electoral core has already been convoked, I think the process the elections may take place on the 12th of October. But it belongs now, it is to Elecam now to accelerate its work such that before the 12th of October, the electoral core is stable and published. Because see, up to date, they have refused to publish the electoral core as provided by section 80 of the electoral code, which is a violation of the law, because the law provides that on the 30th of December of each year, the global electoral core should be published. And particularly for a presidential election, you need to have the global national electoral list, because the presidential election has only one electoral constituency. The electoral constituency is unique. Political actors should make sure that each person is registered only once. And so for the presidential election, this national electoral list is very, very fundamental, because the constituency is unique, and each political actor needs to know who are the voters. So the fact that the case has been taken to court does not suspend the process, but it is a way of pressurizing Elecam to make sure that the national electoral list is available before the 12th of October 2025. So Elecam can still catch up by publishing the national electoral list before the 12th of October 2025. That's
So before this challenge, the MRC had gone to the Constitutional Council to ask the Constitutional Council to order Elecam to publish the national electoral list as provided for in Article 80 of the Electoral Code. But the Constitutional Council said it was not yet ripe for that issue to be handled, and they could not handle it. And the reading and interpretation of the reading of the decision gave the impression that the Constitutional Council said Elecam should actually publish that list, but they have not yet done so. Are there any legal repercussions for that?
No, if we read the decision that was rendered by the Constitutional Council previously, the argument that was raised was that this action could not be accepted just because the electoral core was not yet convoked. So now they cannot bring out the same ground, because now the electoral core has already been conveyed, and so they can no more based on the same ground to say that this case cannot be understood. Yes, they must understand it, because the MSA acted after the convening of the electoral core. So the ground that was raised previously cannot stand now, because they acted after the convening of the electoral core. So we have to wait, because the Constitutional Council has now to pronounce itself on this matter before the elections takes place on the 12th of October. After all, they need to pronounce themselves and give time to Elecam for it to publish the national electoral list. So they have to do it very quickly for Elecam to publish the list, and giving a reasonable time to political actors to even verify the credibility of that list before the election can take place on the 12th. So we should be vigilant to hear what the Constitutional Council will say on this special case raised by MF.
From your analysis, what are the options or the different decisions that the Constitutional Council could arrive at?
No, I think that the Constitutional Council now has no other option than to order Elecam to publish the national electoral list. Because without the national electoral list, but where are we going to? Can you think of a fair election without knowing who are the voters? No, I think there is only one option. There is no other option than the one to oblige Elecam to publish the national electoral list within a reasonable deadline that will permit Elecam first to publish the electoral list, and for the political actors to verify the credibility of this list. There is no other option than this one.
Last week, I published an opinion in some newspapers in which I argued that Elecam must work with political parties to clean up the electoral list, because if Elecam is doing it by herself, there is a question of credibility. We are not sure if the list that is published is going to be the list that is going to be used for the elections. And the electoral technology is managed entirely by Elecam, and political parties don't have access to that electoral technology. So what would the publication of a list without having the backside data of it serve the political parties if they cannot see if after publication Elecam still takes off names, or Elecam adds names, or Elecam changes polling stations, or Elecam creates other polling stations that do not exist?
No, the process of registering the voters makes that the political parties are part of the commission, but that is done at the level of the council. But now, so if the list was to be limited at the level of the council, there will be no problem, because it is easy to verify that all those who have been registered at the level of the council are present or not on the electoral list. But now the particularity of this list is that it concerns the presidential election, where the constituency is unique. And so the fact that political parties took part in the elaboration of the list at the level of the council cannot suffice, because a voter can be registered in 3 or 4 councils. So if you don't have that national electoral list, you cannot discover if the person is registered once or many times. So that national electoral list is still necessary, and it needs to be handled to political actors for them to verify. Because if you don't put the list in an alphabetical order, you cannot verify if someone is registered twice or not. You see, so the work was done at the level of the council, but it needs now to be verified at the national level, so as to make sure that no person is registered twice. So despite the fact that there was a commission where the political parties took part at the level of the council, it still be necessary for the presidential election to have the national electoral list, which is the only way to make sure that a voter cannot vote twice. Because at this moment, without the national electoral list, you may have someone who can be registered in 5, 7, 10 councils. How will you know if there is no national electoral list? The commission that is working at the level of the council can verify that Timtchueng is registered only once. That commission has no way to make sure that the same Timtchueng is registered in another council, another neighboring council. So it is only the national electoral list which can permit to verify that no person is registered twice, or to verify that all those who have been registered are appearing on the list. So it is very important, and I say there is no other way for the Constitutional Council than to order the publication of this national electoral list.
Yeah, I'm not saying this to discount the fact that having a unique list is necessary for credibility and accountability. But if you are registered in, say, 2 different council areas, and on election day, vehicles don't move around, How does that affect fraud?
No, the limitation of the movement of vehicles is not completely absolute. Security forces, they have the right to move with their vehicles during the voting day. Members of the electoral processes, that is, there are these laissez-passer, which are given to some political actors for them to help them supervise the process in different areas. And these people are not called upon to move alone. They are moving with some teams. So the limitation of movement is not that absolute. So it is still possible for members, for example, of the CPDM or even security forces, they may help carrying people from one council to another. And you see, and one vote is not negligible. Any vote counts for the presidential election. So it is necessary to avoid all this situation. And the only way to prevent it is to have the national electoral list, which guarantees that any citizen can vote only once. That's it.
The Director General of Elecam has said he's published the list by publishing it in the different councils, and that is his discretion, yes, because the law does not say how he should publish the list. MRC has argued that the law says the list, but Elecam has published lists. So the problem, yes, here is the linguistic argument on the S. It comes out better in French, where la loi dit la liste, and Elecam has published la liste communale.
Yes.
But when you put the liste communale in its entirety, it constitutes one list, which could be called la liste. How is the legal argument, yes, around these propositions?
No, I think the Director General of Elecam is of very bad faith. He's of very bad faith. Because when you read the Electoral Code, you will note that the law clearly makes a difference between the list at the level of the council, which is compared to the national electoral list. You will note that in the text, the epithet national electoral list is clearly used by the legislator. So in the Electoral Code, we see that in a particular situation, they talk of the national electoral list, which means that it is a unique list. It is not that of the council. It is easy to build the national electoral list by fusing the list which has come from the council. Why are they not doing it? Because it is clearly provided by Section 80, of the Electoral Code. There is no doubt on that. Section 80 talks of the national electoral list, which comes after they have wiped out all the irregularities on the list that comes from the councils. No, there is no ambiguity on that point. The law clearly differentiates the communal electoral list with the national electoral list. You will see that the adjectives are different. Somewhere they talk of the communal electoral list, which means that having 360 councils, you understand that there are many lists of this type. There are at least 360 of this type. But when it comes to the national electoral list, Cameroon is not two countries. There is only one Cameroon. So the national electoral list can only be one. And that national electoral list for the presidential election, since the constituency is unique, it is the global Cameroon territory. The Cameroon itself and the embassy, they make only one constituency. So for that, there is the need for the national, I insist on the national electoral list, which is not the list that are published at the level of the council. It is completely different.
Have you considered the possibility of the impossibility of executing that Article 80 of the Electoral Code? Because as it's customary, Cameroon publishes lists on walls and billboards. Is there a billboard in Cameroon that can contain the 8 million registered Cameroonians right now?
No, that argument is a false argument. When we are talking of a public service, and when it comes to public service, there are principles that govern any public service around the world. Whenever be the country, you will see that the public service is based on one of the principles that govern the public service is the principle of adaptation. The principle of adaptation means that the public service should always find ways of improving the quality of service by adapting to the economic, environmental, technological, and scientific environment. So nowadays, you cannot imagine that the national electoral list will be pasted on a wall. It's not possible. There is no wall that can receive more than 8 million persons. No, such a wall is not possible. So by taking in consideration what is done in other countries, like in Cote d'Ivoire, like in France, the national electoral list is digitalized. That is, it is put in a numeric form and given to political parties. So in their computer, they can arrange it either alphabetically, either by town, either by date of birth, and so on. What was done in Ivory Coast for them to discover that in the national electoral list, there were more than thousands, there were about 4,000 persons who were supposed to be aged more than 100 years, which was not imaginable. So if the national electoral list was not given to political parties, how would they have discovered all these irregularities? So I say, according by the principle of adaptation, Elecam has to take into consideration the new modalities that permit to publish information. They can paste it on their website. Why is it not possible today? The principle of adaptation imposes that. That is, in the absence of a wall where the whole national electoral list can be pasted, they can make it numerically. Okay? They can make it in a numeric form. Okay? And by making it available in a numeric form, political parties can manage it easily by introducing the modality by which they can verify. That is, if they consider, for example, the date of birth of those who are registered, it may help to discover if there are persons who are registered aging 200 years, for example. Can you imagine that there may be a Cameroonian aged 200 years today? So those are only, it is by giving it available, by making it available in a numerical form, that the verification can also easily be done with the means that are available today. Even if it is not written in the electoral code, the principle of adaptation, which is a general principle governing the public service, imposes to Elecam to adapt the way they can make that national list available to the citizen and to the political parties. So that ground cannot hold nowadays.
Yeah, in the op-ed I published again this week, I made some arguments in it, and it's easy for Elecam to give political parties, if they argue that it's not possible to give them a list in numeric form or there is no wall to publish the article on, Elecam can give political parties the access to read the electoral data without capacity to edit, read only, so that they can see the data of the voters that they have in the database. Otherwise, they can also let Elecam hire a consultant, a cybersecurity consultant or a cybersecurity risk assessor, to audit the list and come out with a report that would identify any irregularities. So it's possible. Elecam could also have a joint platform where Elecam and the candidates all sit together to review the list and identify the issues together. So if it comes to a question of good faith, adaptability, or sincerity, Elecam can do to bring out the right list to the satisfaction of all the candidates. Elections are driven by interest, and stakeholders want to see their interests protected. And this is all because the elections are high stakes, and people want to ensure that what comes out of the ballot box is reliable, is believable, and is acceptable to all. So Elecam can play a very good role to calm down the tensions that we already see around the country. Ladies and gentlemen, if you're just joining us now, you are joining the Beyond Africa podcast with me, Ngalim Bernard, as a host, and my guest, Professor Moïse Timtchueng. We are discussing updates and events that are happening in Cameroon around the elections. Prof, did you have anything to add on that question? Because I want us to move to the next topic.
No, I just want to agree with you. All the options that you have indicated are modalities that Elecam, if Elecam is of good faith, they can use. If in case where they say that maybe for personal data, they cannot publish the list for at the attention of anyone, they can use one of the modalities you've indicated. If they are of good faith, they can put in place one of those options in order to calm down the tension, the political tension in the country. So everything depends on the good faith of Elecam. So the means are not lacking. The options are available. So it suffices for Elecam to be of good faith, and they will find the ways to agree, to reach an agreement with all the political parties. So I clearly agree with what you have said before translating to the second point. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Ladies and gentlemen, if you are joining us now, you're watching the Beyond Africa podcast with me, Ngalim Bernard, as your host, and my guest, Professor Moïse Timtchueng. And before we continue, kindly subscribe to this channel, share this information, because we are going to continue having insightful, memorable, educational, and thought-provoking conversations, interviews, analysis, and opinions on this channel for the next 3 months about Cameroon's elections. Also, leave a comment, because your comments enrich us. If you have somebody you think we should be talking to on this podcast, please send us a message or leave that person's name in the comment section so we can invite that person for this quality of conversations we are having. So, Prof, since 3 days ago, we've seen candidates filing at Elecam in their various offices at the national level and regional levels to submit their candidature papers. We've seen Barrister Keremuna, he's already done that. We've seen President Paul Biya delegating his Secretary General of the party and his Chief of Cabinet today. And yesterday we saw information on social media that Professor Maurice Kamto has been invested by Manidem. And amongst all these, the most competitive or the most talked about is Professor Maurice Kamto's candidature. The reason I'm talking about Professor Maurice Kamto's candidature is because we discussed this last time. The MRC was not all. Let me put it this way. The reason we're talking about Professor Maurice Kamto's candidature is because it was argued that the MRC is not legally qualified to invest a candidate for these elections. Is that why Professor Maurice Kamto has been invested by Manidem?
No, that's not the main ground. You know, I was one of the main advocates of the idea of the void imposed mandate. In French, le mandat impératif nul. It is a provision of our constitution that any elected person represents the whole nation. And so the mandate does not belong to the political party, but it's the mandate of the people, which is carried by the elected person, or who is not an object, who is not the property of the political party. So representing the whole people, and benefiting from the nullity of the imposed mandate, he can carry his mandate from one party to another. Being a member of any political party, his mandate goes with the capacity of his political party to invest any candidate. So nowadays, since CRM, MRC has elected authorities, those authorities are representing the MRC in the instances where they are sitting. So, and particularly in municipal councils, you can no more say that the MRC is not present. MRC is present through his members who has moved from the parties that presented them during the election. Being now member of CRM or of MRC, they give the power to CRM to invest Professor Kamto. So this modality has not varied. MRC could still present Professor Kamto. Legally speaking, this presentation will have no problem. Now, but you know, for a political party like MRC, it is politically strategic to be presented by another party because CRM militants, MRC militants are already a guarantee for the party. You see? So by presenting the candidature of Professor Kamto by CRM will not give him any added value. You see? It will not give him any supplementary value.
Then why did Professor Kamto have to get his investiture from Manidem?
No, I was saying that it is very strategic. It is very strategic because the members, the militants of CRM are already what we call in French un acquis. That is, it is something that is already sure. So by choosing to be presented by Manidem, first of all, this presentation has as first political benefit to put an end to all the tribalistic speculation. Because, the tribalism against MLC has been carried by Elimbi Lobe and many of the militants of the PCRN of Cabral Libi. So you'll see that those who were presenting MLC as a Bamileke party were notably people of the littoral, because the head was Elimbi Lobe and he was followed by members of Cabral Libi's party, which was PCRN. So by being presented by the Manidem, I think it is a great hit. It is a great shock to all those people who have spent all their time saying that MLC was the Babileke party. Now that it has joined with a littoral, with a sour party, I think those who were presenting this tribalism will go now and see their homework. Secondly, you cannot forget that Manidem is the real heir of our political nationalism, because Manidem, the first name of Manidem was UPC Manidem, and the leaders of Manidem has always claimed that they are fighting to revive all the philosophy, all the ideology that was presented by our leaders, our nationalist leader. So by joining now with Manidem, I think MRC is reconciling the whole national population to their original ideal of liberation, of freedom, and democracy. So symbolically or politically, this presentation is more important than the option that CRM had to present Professor Kamto by itself. The benefits are too many, and we'll take time to explain that to all the citizens. That is I would say the opportunity, the pertinence of this option, because the benefits are too many. It is a fight against tribalism that has been presented by Elimbi Lobe and militant of the PCRN of Cabral Libi, and it is a reconciliation. It reconciles the nation, which is original history, our nationalism that was presented by the founders of UPC, because Manidem is the normal heir of the UPC ideology as was presented by Umnobe and NS20. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Prof. You have raised political arguments centering around history and around tribalism.
Yes.
But what about
Yes.
the legal arguments of considering that Elecam and the Constitutional Council would not validate Professor Maurice Kamto's candidature if it's submitted by the MRC? Was that a consideration in the MRC playbook? Would you analyze?
I know that many of our militants, because I'm also militant of the MRC, many of our militants were impressed by what was said by members of CPDM. Because even yesterday you heard Mr. Tanganji say that the candidature of Maurice Kamto will be invalidated if he is presented by the MRC. So we cannot say that he had no influence. It has influenced some of our militants. So who were afraid that if Professor Kamto was presented by MRC, maybe according to what CPDM militants were saying, the candidature may be cancelled. Maybe it has influenced. But personally, as can say, as a legal specialist, I would say that this ground could not stand, because there is no legal argument which can prevent MRC from regularly presenting the candidature of Professor Moïse Timtchueng. I think that putting the options on a balance, what has mainly determined MRC to the option it has taken, I think it is the political advantages which were attached to the presentation of his candidacy by Manidem. Because for our militants or sympathizers of MRC, it is already, again, we can already condemn them. But by tending the hand to another political party, you see that we are improving the extent of those who can vote for Professor Kamto. So I think strategically, it was more important to be presented by another party from where we could have the election of we could have the votes of its member than being presented by the MSA, which will limit the vote in favor of Professor Kamto only to the militants of MSA. I think that the argument based on the irreversibility of his candidacy is not a valid argument, because nowadays, and we still persist, that MSA could validly present the candidature of Professor Moïse Timtchueng. But I think what has prevailed is the political strategy, because by being presented by Manidem, as I said, it is a sign against the argument of tribalism that has always been raised. And secondly, it reconciles the Cameroonian nation with its original history, the nationalism, the authentic nationalism that was presented by the founders of UPC, whose heritage is now carried in our political scene by Manidem. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Prof. Was Manidem a member of the APC?
No, Manidem up to yesterday, Manidem was not a member of APC. No, Manidem was not. Manidem was functioning as an independent party. I even think that Manidem previously was part of the ATP. The ATP, that was the first coalition created by Olivier Billet. But some weeks later, Mr. Anicet Ekane resigned from that coalition and was alone. So up to yesterday, Manidem was not the member of APC. But now that it has presented the candidature of Professor Moïse Timtchueng, it will now play a great role in his campaign and to mobilize its electorate in favor of Professor Kamto. So Manidem will be called upon to work with MRC and all the other members of APC.
Prof, are you telling me that Manidem and MSA just reached a conclusion yesterday for Manidem to invest Professor Moïse Timtchueng? I don't want to agree with that.
No, they were collaborating in an informal way. That is, there were talks between the two parties, because I think Mr. Anicet Ekane was the invited guest on a channel in Douala today, Balafon Radio. He has disclosed that they have been discussing things about 2 months, but it was very confidential, and it was not done under the banner of APC. No, it was a bilateral discussion between MRC and Manidem. What is sure is that MRC was also giving accounts to other members of APC of its discussion with other parties, because it is not only with Manidem. Even the other parties who were not members of APC were also in discussion with. We are now happy that the discussion that has given visible fruit, is the one between MRC and Manidem. And since now it falls under the option that was even indicated by those of CRM, by those of CPDM, they have no way now to contest this. Because if you listen to Gregoire Onangini, Atanganji, they all propose that if Kamto wants to have no problem, he should be presented by a party which has elected person since 2020. And that is done now. On what ground now will they continue to discuss about Kamto's candidature? There is no way, because we have given them what they themselves propose. And you see, they have been caught in their proper trap. Okay? They have been trapped in because they thought that it was not possible. Because they have tried to contact all the political parties to warn them that they should not accept any negotiation with Kamto and so on, thinking that it was impossible. But you see, Manidem has now dribbled them, and they could not see it come. And strategically, you see that Kamto is very powerful.
I think that endorsement or that investiture by Manidem took many people by surprise, if not everybody by surprise, because the last I remember of Manidem was their membership in the group de Douala, where they Anicet Ekane actually suspended Professor Ayuno because Professor Ayuno went to France and said he is supporting Maurice Kamto. At some point, I'm beginning to think that was a strategic move that was already in place well ahead of time. And the suspension, the dismissal, Ayuno's speech, Cyril Baka's statement, all were used to distract public opinion from thinking that Le Groupe de Douala could actually be endorsing and investing Professor Maurice Kamto. And if that is what happens, then that is political mastery. And I think it's up to it. I think Professor Maurice Kamto is up to it, and he needs to be appreciated for being that politically savvy. And then those who worked with him, especially Le Groupe de Douala, should also be congratulated for their degree of maturity in confidentiality throughout the negotiations process, because it did not leak out and nobody heard about this. Is that one of the reasons Professor Maurice Timtchueng decided not to join a platform where everybody comes out as equals, and everything is done in the public, because information could leak and the CPDM or other people could frustrate the purpose?
I agree with you. We have to pay tribute to the members of the Douala. And you saw CPDM has published many communiques on behalf of the Douala group, which were fake news. Even, I think some 2 days ago, they published a communique saying that MRC was discussing the MCNC of Mr. Mo on corruption, on corruptive. You see, and today they have published a communique saying that was a fake communique, because they published something that was supposedly signed by Anicet, Ekane, and Sam Baka, which was not true. You see, I think we have to appreciate the work that was done by the group of Douala, and they have not hesitated even to show their good faith by saying that, by anticipating on the presentation of Kamto as the appropriate, Prof. Ayuno has started disclosing the conclusion of their work before its maturity. So I think they were very responsible.
Yeah. So the latest legal question that is disturbing or that needs to be addressed is what you addressed on your podcast today. We can go over it, but I invite everybody to go listen to it in more detail. That is question on the eligibility of Manidem to invest Professor Maurice Kamto while he is not expressly a member of Manidem. Someone shared a post recently that said Professor Maurice Kamto must resign or must show his resignation letter from MRC and his adherence to Manidem. Jean de Dieu Momo has done some analysis, which I don't think are legal, but he says Professor Maurice Kamto must resign from the MRC because of whatsoever laws. But when I read the language of the Electoral Code, it says a party. But in either case, Elecam is not going to request the letter from MRC to see that Professor Kamto has resigned. And the only thing is asking from a political party is the presentation and nomination papers submitted by the party sponsoring the candidate where applicable. It doesn't say membership in the party. It doesn't say resignation from a previous party. It doesn't say intention to join the party at any point. It says the presentation and nomination papers submitted by the party sponsoring the candidate. I think the question on resignation is not necessary. Thank you so much for coming to the Beyond Africa podcast, Professor Timtchueng. It's always very interesting talking with you, especially your reference to the law and your reference to foundational grounds for anything you want to advocate as a point of reference for people to work on. Thank you very much, Prof. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for watching this program. As you have seen, it's quite interesting, it's quite educational and insightful. And we promise you it's going to be more than this in the days ahead. We're going to bring in guests from all over the spectrum to discuss these issues that will shape the country and that will definitely shape the continent of Africa. Because from every indication, this is a very important election in the life of Cameroon. The future is certain that the elections are going to hold, and whatever comes out of the ballot box should be determinant for the future of Cameroon and, of course, the future of Africa. Stay tuned and see you in the next edition. Here I have been Galim Bernard, your host on the Beyond Africa podcast. Goodbye and see you.